Lessons in Gyan, knowledge of God's greatness. Vachanamritam, Loya 17.13. Now, what is this greatness of Bhagwan? Well, it is due to the fear of Bhagwan that Indra reigns. That the sun, the moon, and flames of fire emit light. That the earth supports one and all. That the oceans do not exceed their boundaries. And that the herbs produce fruit in their appropriate seasons. Also, it is Bhagwan who is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world, and whose powers include Kal, Maya, Purush, and Akshar. Then, what object in the world can attract someone who has understood the greatness of Bhagwan in this way? Well, not even Kam, Krodh, Lobh, man, Isha, Swad, fine clothes, wealth, women, or any of the Pachvishais can bind him. This is because he has assessed everything. He knows Bhagwan is like this, and these are the rewards of engaging in Bhagwan's worship and listening to kathas and talks. Akshar is like this, and the bliss associated with him is like this. Furthermore, the pleasures of Golok, Vaikuntha, and Shvetadvip are like this. The pleasures of Prakriti and Purush are like this. The pleasures of Brahmlok are like this. The pleasures of Swarg are like this. And the happiness of a kingdom is like this. Purport. The passage begins by asking the question, what is the greatness of Bhagwan? Bhagwan is a Sanskrit word that means God or Supreme Being. The passage then goes on to answer this question by describing the different aspects of Bhagwan's greatness. The passage first states that it is due to the fear of Bhagwan that Indra reigns. Indra is the Hindu god of rain, and the passage is saying that Indra only reigns because he is afraid of Bhagwan. This is a way of saying that the natural world is subject to Bhagwan's control. The passage then goes on to list other things that are due to the fear of Bhagwan, such as the sun, the moon, and fire emitting light, the earth supporting us, the oceans not exceeding their boundaries, and the herbs producing fruit in their appropriate seasons. This list is meant to convey the vastness and power of Bhagwan. The passage then states that Bhagwan is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world. This is a way of saying that Bhagwan is ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the world. The passage then goes on to list some of Bhagwan's other powers, such as Kal, time, Maya, illusion, Purush, the male principle, and Akshar, the eternal. These powers are meant to convey the vastness and complexity of Bhagwan's nature. The passage then asks the question, what object in the world can attract someone who has understood the greatness of Bhagwan in this way? The answer is that nothing in the world can attract such a person. This is because they have assessed everything and know the true value of material objects. The passage concludes by saying that the person who has understood the greatness of Bhagwan knows what Bhagwan is like, what the rewards are for engaging in Bhagwan's worship and listening to kathas and talks, what Akshar is like, and what the bliss associated with him is like. This person also knows what the pleasures of Golok, Vaikuntha, and Shvetadvip are like, the pleasures of Prakriti and Purush are like, the pleasures of Brahmlok are like, the pleasures of Swarg are like, and the happiness of a kingdom is like. In summary, the passage is a beautiful and evocative description of the greatness of Bhagwan. It uses vivid imagery and poetic language to convey the vastness and power of God. The passage also emphasizes the importance of understanding Bhagwan's greatness, and it challenges the reader to consider their own limited understanding of God. Additional thoughts. The passage is a reminder that God is the ultimate source of everything that exists. The passage also emphasizes the importance of spiritual knowledge and understanding. The passage can help us to appreciate the greatness of God and to live our lives in a more meaningful way.
Job 38:4, 38:30, King James Version. The first of the poetic books in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible is the Book of Job, which originates from the Ketuvim writings section of the Hebrew Bible, Tanakh. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut up the sea with doors, when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it? And brake up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors? And said, Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed? Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place? That it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withholden, and the high arm shall be broken. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? Or hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, and that thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof? Knowest thou it, because thou wast then born? Or because the number of thy days is great? Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? Which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. By what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder? To cause it to rain on the earth, where no man is, on the wilderness, wherein there is no man. To satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth? Hath the rain a father? Or who hath begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb came the ice? And the hoary frost of heaven, who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen.
Purport. In these verses, God is speaking to Job, who has been questioning God's justice. God is challenging Job to consider the vastness and complexity of the natural world, and to ask himself if he really understands how it all works. The verses begin with God asking Job a series of questions about the creation of the world. These questions are all rhetorical, meaning that they do not expect an answer. Instead, they are meant to humble Job and to make him realize how little he knows about the world. For example, God asks Job, Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Verse 4. This question is meant to remind Job that he was not there when the world was created, and that he therefore does not have the knowledge to question God's ways. The verses then go on to describe the natural world in great detail. God talks about the sea, the clouds, the day and night, the springs of the sea, the gates of death, the treasures of the snow, and the lightning of thunder. These descriptions are meant to show Job the vastness and complexity of the natural world, and to make him realize how little he knows about it. The verses conclude with God asking Job a final series of questions about the natural world. These questions are even more rhetorical than the ones before them, and they are meant to leave Job speechless. For example, God asks Job, Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Verse 16. This question is meant to remind Job that he is simply a human being and that he cannot possibly understand the mysteries of the natural world. In conclusion, the verses you have shared are a powerful reminder of the vastness and complexity of the natural world. They are also a reminder of our own limitations as human beings. When we face challenges in life, it is important to remember that we are not alone and that there is a God who is greater than us and who understands the world in ways that we cannot. Additional thoughts. The verses are a reminder of the power and majesty of God. The verses also emphasize the importance of humility. The verses can help us to appreciate the beauty and complexity of the natural world. Similarities and differences between the two passages. The verses from the Vachanamritam and the King James Bible are similar in a number of ways. Both passages describe the greatness of God and the power that God has over the natural world. Both passages emphasize that God is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world. And both passages suggest that those who understand the greatness of God will be free from the bondage of material desires. However, there are also some key differences between the two passages. The Vachanamritam passage is more poetic and lyrical, while the biblical passage is more straightforward and didactic. The Vachanamritam passage also goes into more detail about the different aspects of God's greatness, such as Kal, time, Maya, illusion, Purush, the male principle, and Akshar, the eternal. Overall, the two passages share a common message about the greatness of God and the importance of understanding that greatness. However, they do so in different ways, and each passage has its own unique strengths and insights. Comprehensive analysis of similarities and differences between the two passages. Similarities. Both passages describe the greatness of God and the power that God has over the natural world. Both passages emphasize that God is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world. Both passages suggest that those who understand the greatness of God will be free from the bondage of material desires. Differences. The Vachanamritam passage is more poetic and lyrical, while the biblical passage is more straightforward and didactic. The Vachanamritam passage also goes into more detail about the different aspects of God's greatness, such as Kal, time, Maya, illusion, Purush, the male principle, and Akshar, the eternal. Conclusion. The two passages share a common message about the greatness of God and the importance of understanding that greatness. However, they do so in different ways, and each passage has its own unique strengths and insights. The Vachanamritam passage is a beautiful and evocative description of God's greatness. It uses vivid imagery and poetic language to convey the vastness and power of God. The biblical passage is more straightforward and didactic, but it also emphasizes the importance of understanding God's greatness. It challenges the reader to consider their own limited understanding of God and to strive to know God more fully. Both passages are valuable resources for those who are seeking to understand the greatness of God. They offer different perspectives on the same topic, and they can help the reader to appreciate the many different ways in which God can be understood.